Republicans are failing America, and it is up to Democrats to step up and meet the moment. Today's guest, Tyler Cohen, is a personal friend and one of the fiercest voices for democracy on the left. He uses his platform in every single way possible to make politics accessible for everyone. Brian joins me today to talk about why Democrats need to stop extending olive branches to Republicans who simply slap them away. Who is willing to fight for our democracy and who is not? But most importantly, we talk about our dogs and how they keep us sane. And by the way, stay tuned to the end for a surprise special guest you won't want to miss. But before we get to any of that, make sure to like this video to support our mission and to defend democracy. Tyler Cohen, welcome back to Defending Democracy.
Great to be here.
You know, what people don't realize is that you and I are actually really good friends, and we talk a lot off air as well as on your amazing channel where we do a regular democracy series. And one of the things when you and I talk about what's going on that sort of always comes up is how the prevailing division within the Democratic Party is not really one about left versus right. And I'm just curious, like, what is your taxonomy right now for the Democratic Party and how to think about where candidates fit in, like where Gavin Newsom, who, you know, just a few months ago was like interviewing Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon and now is like viewed as a wild-eyed progressive. Like, yeah. I just think these are proxies for something else.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a question of whether you are more moderate or more progressive or whatever label you want to use. I think this upcoming election is going to be a referendum on who's willing to fight versus who's capable of folding. And we saw that really play itself out in this shutdown fight. I mean, it came into very clear view in this shutdown fight. And look, the reality is that you need people who are going to match the political lean or political ideology of their districts. And that's okay. Like, part of being in a Big Ten party is that you are in a Big Ten party, is that you accept people in Jaron Golden's district, and you accept people in AOC's district, and the people who run for office have to be reflections of the people that they serve, and that's okay. But I think that the issue that's at play right now is that there are plenty of Democrats who are not actually willing to meet the Republicans on the playing field that they're on right now. And that's an issue. And so as we look toward this next crop of Democratic candidates, we've already seen it in their responses to how those 8 Senate Democrats capitulated to the Republicans in the shutdown fight. A lot of them that I've seen online are being very clear-eyed about the fact that we needed to have fought, that we needed not to have caved. And I think that that's going to be a litmus test issue as we head toward 2026. As well it should be. Like, we should have a Democratic Party that isn't constantly, like, we've seen, I cannot tell you how many times I've been scrolling, whether it's Blue Sky or Twitter or Threads, and just see the Charlie Brown meme with Lucy holding the football over and over and over again. I mean, it was like a parody of itself by the end of the day. And the fact that that's become synonymous with the Democratic brand is a problem. And it doesn't, again, this doesn't necessarily have to do with whether you're more progressive or whether you're more moderate, because what they were fighting for is like to preserve ACA subsidies so that healthcare would be affordable. Everybody in the Democratic coalition agrees with that. Everybody, whether you're more moderate, agrees that you should have affordable healthcare. Of course, progressives agree that you should have affordable healthcare. So this isn't a matter of political ideology. It's a matter of your willingness to actually fight to defend the values that you claim to hold. And so as we, head toward this next midterm cycle, that's going to be the whole ball game here as we figure out whether we want to be a party where it feels like we're going to put in place people like Merrick Garland, or whether we're going to put in place people who are actually going to make sure that we can fight the Republican Party that we're dealing with today.
So I'm curious, because one of the places that you have been most vocal about and that you have focused on so much of your attention, and successfully so, by the way, is in the redistricting arena, where we have seen, again, this kind of like dividing line,
Yeah.
And let's be honest, you and I have done lots of videos on your channel, and I hope everyone subscribes to your channel because it's one of the best places that I go to get information about what's happening. But we've talked about this ad nauseum. You have situations like in California where you have Gavin Newsom, who frankly quite surprised me. I mean, I watched Gavin Newsom after Kamala Harris lost, like I said, sitting down with Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon on his podcast, and did not peg him for someone who is going to be really willing to fight really hard against a lot of long odds and really lead a fight there. And on the other hand, You've interviewed, the governor of Colorado, who would seemingly have a lot of free range to be very progressive. We both have called out the state Senate president of Maryland. I mean, it's hard to imagine a position in which you have more freedom to fight for.
The state Senate president in Maryland? Yeah.
Right, you're the state, so it doesn't strike me you have to be terribly courageous. Is redistricting a microcosm of this, or is it a symptom of it?
I think it's both of those things. The reality is that as we head toward this next election cycle, as we head toward whatever the next iteration of the Democratic Party is, this is a pretty clear microcosm of the broader fight. You have a lot of Democrats who are either not doing anything, and that is the Jared Polises of the world. You have Democrats who are saying the right thing, but we haven't seen any action yet. We've heard the right things from J.B. Pritzker. We haven't seen action yet. We've heard the right things from Kathy Hochul. Haven't seen action yet. And then you have some folks who are actually doing something. We have Gavin Newsom here in California. We have the state legislature in Virginia, and hopefully we'll have Abigail Spanberger sign whatever legislation they put forward into law. Same with Mikey Sherrill, hopefully at some point when she gets into office as well. But I think that this redistricting fight is exactly emblematic of where we've been, and frankly, Newsom, by virtue of doing what he did and recognizing that there were a million reasons to have not done this, which is generally where you would expect Democrats to be. And the fact that he did it anyway.
Particularly Democrats in California.
Right. The fact that he did it anyway and that it passed with about 2/3 of the vote hopefully gives that permission structure, hopefully incentivizes other Democratic governors, other Democratic state legislatures to see that not only is it the morally right thing to do, because we are in a moment where Republicans are doing it, so you can either meet them, fight fire with fire, or just do nothing, but then capitulate to those very Republicans who are barreling ahead with their plans anyway. And so hopefully it gives that permission structure for these folks to do that, and not just to kind of rest on their laurels and expect good governance to just happen in a vacuum, because it's not. And we have relied on this idea that if we just confer some goodwill to the other side, if we just compromise with them, if we just extend an olive branch to them one more time, maybe this time it'll finally net us that goodwill that we've been hoping for, maybe that elusive reciprocation that we've been hoping for. And the reality is that it never comes. And so good on Newsom, good on California Democrats for defying very long odds and making it happen, and giving a shot in the ass of some courage to other Democrats across the country to see that, as I was saying, not only is it the morally right thing to do, but it's the politically right thing to do. The fact that we can get more people in California to vote for this thing than I believe the margin for Kamala Harris in the 2024 election is pretty incredible, but it shows that there is a hunger to actually combat the extrajudicial and anti-constitutional actions of this Republican Party.
Now, one of the things that I've gotten to know about you from talking to you, like I said, off air, is you really have strong views about policies. Like, you want politics to work. You want Democrats to be elected because you want good policies. You actually care about not just that elections win so that people can sit in offices and be called sir and ma'am, but rather because you want policy outcomes that will benefit the entire American public. And maybe that's the reason why you are successful at what you do, rather than, for example, being a political consultant in Washington, D.C. And it occurs to me that watching a lot of the fights that I see going on, sometimes the left, frankly, shooting at the center of the Democratic Party, sometimes the establishment wing shooting at the left of the Democratic Party, it seems like it's about something else. It doesn't feel like it is always aimed at actually achieving the policy outcomes. It's about gaining some upper hand. So I'm curious, because I've mentioned now twice Newsom and this sort of what seemed to me to be an inconsistency between, on the one hand, having a podcast where you're interviewing very conservative people, and then on the other hand, being very, very forward-leaning. What is the place for that kind of, engagement with, Republicans or people you disagree with?
Yeah, look, I think that engagement is necessary. In fact, most of the time that I spend doing TV or other shows, notwithstanding, the conversations that we have, but otherwise, the time I spend doing any media, I really try to go places where I think that there's going to be either center or right-leaning audiences. I'm often on Chris Cuomo's show. I'm often on Piers Morgan's show. And so I think it's important to actually, get out of these echo chambers that we've built for ourselves. I mean, the reality is the internet is very bifurcated now. And I remember when I first started on Facebook back in like 2017, and it was the Wild West. Nobody was segmented into their information silos. And if you said anything, you're going to get hit with responses from every end of the ideological spectrum. And slowly, the algorithms learned what to serve people. Slowly, people, distanced themselves from any dissenting opinions. And now we're in a situation where, we have Twitter and Blue Sky, where there's virtually no overlap between the people who are on these platforms, and oftentimes people don't want to hear any dissenting views. But the reality is that there are people in that middle segment for whom hearing those debates play themselves out are going to be really important. And we saw in this past election cycle on November 4th that there is a pretty decent contingent of swing voters out there, certainly bigger than I would have presumed before. And I think that those people are gettable, and you have to do the work of persuasion. To the point of Newsom, I think he deserves credit for iterating. I think what he did in the early days of his podcast with Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon was certainly clumsy and for a lot of people missed the mark. But when you're trying to figure out how to have a successful strategy, I think failure is a big part of that. And if you're only willing to do what's safe and you aren't going to allow yourself to iterate or to try new things or certainly to fail, then I think that you're not going to find something new. And so it's important that he, that he takes swings, and part of taking swings is that you're gonna miss. But the reality is Newsom has one of the most listened to and watched podcasts of certainly the most listened to and watched of any politician on the left, and through iterating, through trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, he carved a really important lane for himself where he said, okay, I'm going to try extending olive branches. I'll see what the reaction to that is. And what he landed on at the end of that is there is a thirst and a hunger for a fighter, in the Democratic coalition. And he emerged as exactly that. And through that, we've seen him and California Democrats put forward this redistricting plan, and it succeeded. And he is the hero of that story. So I think it's okay to allow yourself to fail. You don't have to be perfect every step of the way. Certainly engaging with other people is something that we should continue doing. And he deserves credit for getting to where he is through the rocky road that it took to get him there.
So I'm curious, because I know you do a lot of debate shows and you do a lot of debate programming. You and I have talked about this off air. I don't do them for a variety of reasons that are personal to me, and I'm glad there are people like you, frankly, that are out there doing them. I am curious, when you do them, are they performative or are they genuine? Because like I said, I've talked to you a lot off air, and you are genuinely the same person. You care about the same sets of issues on air as off air. You're not pretending to be something you're not. I'm not suggesting that the people you debate are, but I also could see why within their media ecosystem and the performative nature of the cruelty has some salience and some value. What do you think it's on the up and up? When you're doing these debates, does it feel like you're debating a real person or just like a theater?
It's hard to say because most of these have been remote. There have been just a very small number of instances where I've actually done them in person. I mean, it doesn't even make sense these days to do it. And frankly, I'm out in California, which is this big blue liberal bastion. There are not that many conservatives left here. I think they've made a big performance of leaving this state and telling everybody about how they've done that. But in the rare instances that I have, spoken to these people, it seems to be genuine. I try not to engage with people who I think are acting in bad faith. I've been I've been offered interviews with people who I think are bad faith actors, and I turn them down because I don't want to be viewed as the liberal foil to some bad faith Republican actor. And so I don't get myself into situations where I'm just waiting to see who the guest is, and then some lunatic pops up on the other, some Pizzagate lunatic pops up on the other side of the screen. I try to make sure that if I'm debating somebody, I know who it is, and that they're legitimate enough so that I don't feel like I'm validating a bad faith actor, or that I am the liberal equivalent of some bad faith actor.
I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Brian Tyler Cohen in a moment. But, legacy media is failing us in this critical time in our nation's history. And that's why I founded Democracy Docket. It was to expose the truth about the attacks on our government and free and fair elections. Now the team is growing to make sure it can bring you the news, information, and analysis that matters most to you. Support their work by becoming a premium member by clicking on the link in the description below. Yeah, so you've turned me on to a lot of other really good and insightful people to pay attention to read, to watch. One of them is David Pakman. He actually gets guests from the other side of the aisle to come on his show. And and I went back after you told me this, and I looked, and you're right, and he does a really good job. Do you ever, is it that they don't want to come on your show? Is it you wouldn't platform them? I mean, what would you do if Ted Cruz called you and said, I'd like to come on your show?
I'd happily have him on.
Is that true? You would?
Yeah. I've tried to get Matt Gaetz. I've tried to get Marjorie Taylor Greene. The most conservative person I think I've ever had on the show was like Adam Kinzinger. to give you an idea of how right-leaning the show is. I understand why they don't come on, and that's not to say that I agree with it, but I understand why. When we live in bifurcated media ecosystems, and they can just go get a fawning interview on some right-wing show, why deal with the trouble of having to answer a follow-up question? Like, why deal with the trouble of being confronted with facts, especially about this administration? The Republicans today, their favorite pastime is pretending that they didn't read the news, or they didn't see Trump's latest post on Truth Social. The notion that they're going to come onto an entire show where they can't just walk away from Manu Raju and pretend that they didn't see it, or they didn't read it, or whatever it may be. And so, I would love to have these people on. I've gotten one response from one congressional office, and it was back when Matt Gaetz was in office, and I got a response after asking. I mean, I'll always ask very nicely, and I'll always treat the staff very nicely. I sent an email asking if he would come on, and I got a response saying something along the lines of, "Thanks so much for reaching out. Just want to make sure we do our due diligence. Is this you?" And it was screenshots of like a dozen tweets that I'd posted about Matt Gaetz. And I was like, okay, if this is your way of saying no, I get it. Touche, well played. And I understand that he's not going to be coming on. So yeah, I mean, just look, I benefit from a media ecosystem where we have people in certain coalitions that want to go talk to people who are ideologically aligned with them. But at the same time, the downside of that is that there's less crossover, and I won't have the opportunity to talk to or question people that I would love to have the opportunity to question. I'm going to amend something I said before. The most conservative person I've had on, insofar as this person's conservative, I did have RFK Jr. during the campaign, and that was a pretty damn contentious interview.
Was he running at the time as a Democrat or a Republican or an independent?
I think he was running as a Democrat, but I remember posing the question about why his biggest donor was Timothy Mellon, which is Trump's biggest donor in the campaign. So, like,
might have been a clue.
Insofar as like he's a Democrat, insofar as he said he's a Democrat, but like when one of the questions has to be why is your biggest donor Donald Trump's biggest donor, then I think that kind of puts on full display the disingenuousness of that claim. But yeah, that was a contentious interview, and his either press secretary or comms director, aide, whatever it may be, was texting me pretty angrily throughout the entire thing. And I knew that would be the last time that I spoke with RFK. So I was like, you know what? I'll just quietly, I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and put my phone down, and that's going to be the end of it. And as long as I get with him is going to be the last time I speak with him. So I might as well make the most of it.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about that media ecosystem that you describe. You are one of the largest, if not the largest, left of center creators on YouTube. You have more than 5 million subscribers to your YouTube channel, plus millions, tens of millions, probably more across other platforms. You've been doing this for a while, though. So talk to me a little bit about why you got into it and like what you've seen evolve over time.
So I got into it because, I moved out to Los Angeles because I wanted to work in the entertainment industry. And ironically enough, my first job in the entertainment industry was working at Fox. But it was Fox Television, like Fox, Fox
So you were an actor.
Yeah, well, my first job was I wanted to work in the industry. And so I wanted to work in TV development. And so I moved out here, and I'm still here 15 years later. But my passion was always politics, and so I would just consume politics relentlessly. Eventually, I moved away from the business part of the industry, and I started working in the acting part of the industry. But even so, I would still consume politics like voraciously. And acting felt very unfulfilling after a certain point when you've gone in on your 10th audition for Doritos, and like there's just a point where you're sitting there and you're sitting in some cattle call commercial audition for cereal or Subway sandwiches or like Nissan cars, whatever it may be. There's just like a point where it hits you that like what you're doing is not making that big of a difference. I liked the performance aspect of it, and I loved politics, and so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna spend a little bit of free time and put some stuff online. I started to notice I was served a little bit of video content on Facebook back when that was the platform everybody was on, and there was no left of center response to what I was seeing. I was seeing right-wing content pop up, and I wasn't seeing any left-wing commentators. And so I just started doing my own videos and putting them out on a daily basis. And I just kind of kept my head down, and I did it every day. And the views went from tens to hundreds to thousands, and eventually they hit critical mass. But the reality is I think a big part of my channel's success was the fact that there was just like an absence of this kind of content, and there was a hunger for this kind of content, and it persists to this day. I mean, Republicans have a massive advantage when it comes to the investments and the resources they have in independent media, and that's owed to the fact that they never got what they needed from legacy media. They didn't see enough of the bias that they needed to see from the CNNs and NBCs and ABCs of the world. They wanted something where it was going to be more like right-wing propaganda. And so they built that for themselves because they weren't happy with the fact that so much of legacy media was fact-based, and they couldn't perpetuate the narrative that they wanted to perpetuate. And so they built something where they could. The problem for the left is like, now people are moving away from legacy media. The Republicans have had 10 years of investments in their propaganda machine. And so we find ourselves in a moment where everybody is consuming media online. The right has been humming along for 10 years, and now we have to throw this together as quickly as we could. I was lucky in the sense that I jumped into this space years ago, almost a decade earlier than everybody else. But and so I think that's in large part what I owe a lot of the success of my platforms to. But I think what we need right now is to very quickly recognize that we need to make up for a decade's worth of lost time. And we've seen that. I mean, we've seen a lot of, good work by people who recognize that we need more voices in this space. You are among them. I mean, your YouTube channel has surged from 0 to 500,000 in, if I'm not mistaken, like less than a year. Is that right?
Yeah, we're now getting close to 600,000, and you're right. It's been a lot of growth, and I've said this to you before, and I've said it on air before, and a lot of that is, frankly, a credit to you. And one of the hallmarks of, I think, your career that has really not been appreciated enough and not been talked about, in part because you're a very humble individual, is you have really helped build the career of a lot of people on YouTube and on social media, including this very channel. And a lot of what you've gotten in return for this is a lot of really negative carping from people who are jealous or are resentful, or who frankly just think that they gain power and prestige by tearing down people who are building this sort of supportive system of creators. You've mentored and you've supported through your organizing efforts stipends for smaller creators who, frankly wouldn't be able to afford, I'm a lawyer, I've got a law practice, I've got a lot of this stuff going on, I'll be just fine. But there are a lot of creators who wouldn't be just fine. I'm not going to ask you whether it was worth it, because you're going to say yes. But Explain to me, or explain why, since you have been in a dominant position, you see a benefit from essentially creating competitors, right? Like creating other channels, other people who are personalities. Why is that? Why is that something of interest to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're right. In a weird way, trying to get more people into this ecosystem chips away at the amount of people who would be able to consume my content. If I dominated in this space, if there were no other big players in this space or any players in this space, that would kind of redound to my benefit. Look, that's not why I do why I do what I do. I view all of this weirdly as kind of a means to an end. Like you were saying before, I want to see us past the things that I've been fighting for a long time. I want to see, ultimately, I want to see Medicare for all. I want to see climate change legislation, some version of the Green New Deal. I mean, as progressive as those policies we can get is what I want to see. And we can't do that, recognizing how the media ecosystem works, if we don't have voices. If we don't have voices on the left that people can build their worldviews up from, and I can't do it on my own. We need lots of people. I mean, I'm as a content consumer, I sit there and I scroll all day, and I know what it's like to not have enough voices, and eventually you get pulled into some right-wing rabbit hole because, as I mentioned before, they've been investing in this space for so long. They have so many voices in this space. This independent media space was cool on the right way before it was cool on the left. And so you have these established figures and the companies they've built and the offshoots of those companies where, where those people hire people. And I mean, they've been building that ecosystem for so long. And so, look, it would be great if millions of people watched every single one of my videos. That would be wonderful. But it's more important that we actually succeed, and that's going to come from getting as many people in this space, so that as people continue to consume content, they're being fed the right kind of content. Again, this is not about like building up as big a media footprint as I can. It's about getting as many people into this space so that we all as a community can reach as many Americans, that we can, share the virtues of progressive governance as we can. That's the ultimate goal here. I think really a rising tide lifts all ships. And so if we do well, if some of us do well, all of us do well. And so that's kind of what I'm pushing for here.
So one of the strategic questions I have about the development of your channel and the development of your content is that it's notable, particularly to me, since I do a regular series with you, and since I am a lawyer, that I note that you added two lawyers, me and Glenn, as regular recurring features, or contributors, whatever you call it. And you did a classroom series with Jamie Raskin, who is, in addition to a member of Congress, also a constitutional lawyer who talks about legal things.
Yeah.
And I am curious if this is because you have some terrible affinity for lawyers, which, if so, like, you need to get over that. Whether you find the law interesting, at which point we definitely need to have you get over that. Or why the emphasis on so much legal content?
Yeah, that's a good question. This may not be popular, but I remember in Trump 1.0, I remember watching Chris Cuomo on CNN, and I remember how he was able to use his legal arguments to dissect so much of the shit that was being thrown at him from the Republicans that he had on. And and it almost made me, like, I had considered going to law school because I thought that was such an effective way of being able to combat all of this stuff. And frankly, Mark, your career is a testament to that. I mean, Democrats and the left more broadly lose a lot, and we lose in a lot of different avenues, but one place that we've seen a lot of success is in the courts, and that's in huge part owed to you and your law firm specifically. And I think that even as we have seen the progressive media ecosystem pale in comparison to what we've seen from Republican lawmakers in terms of just getting shit done, the one bright spot that we've seen is how we've succeeded in the courts, and I think that there's a lot of virtue owed to the fact that whereas you can manipulate people in the media, you can manipulate people, in the halls of Congress, all of that doesn't rely on a strict adherence to reality. it does in the courtroom. Like that's the last vestige where facts matter in this world, and I think there's a lot of virtue in that, and you win because the facts are on your side. And so I think that that's a space that I have a lot of affinity for, and I'm quite deferential to for that reason. I mean, it's like, it's like this kind of quaint idea that even as there's so much mis and disinformation, even as there's so much lies and obfuscations, and the whole space has kind of grown really gross, and it is gross, and it's a different world than right now in 2025 than it used to be in 2017 when I started. The legal system has been kind of our last vestige where facts matter and reality matters, and where Democrats, again in large part to the work that you've done and your team has done, still see a lot of success. And so yeah, I have a lot of affinity for the the legal world of things.
So how does legal content do on your channel, like relative to, I'm not sure I've asked you this as a generalized question, like relative to like politicians, I assume are number one, like current political news number two. Like where do the lawyers fit into this? Or not the lawyers, where does legal content generally fit in?
So I actually think maybe for the same reason that I just outlined, legal content is generally some of the best performing content on the channel, if not outright the best performing content on the channel. Again, like there comes a point where when I cover what Republican politicians say and we see such shamelessness, there's a feeling of helplessness and despair that our opponent here, it's really difficult to beat somebody for whom shame no longer matters.
Right.
That's the problem with Trump. I mean, I titled my book that I released last year "Shameless," and it's really difficult to fight against an opponent for whom shame counts for nothing. There was a time when shame counted for a lot. It doesn't matter anymore, and that can be really frustrating for people. But there's a lot of vindication when that people can feel, probably the last space that they can feel that vindication, when you have a judge continue to defer to reality, when you have attorneys admit the truth, Trump attorneys admit the truth in court and say something that they can't say in the public square because there are they face sanctions or whatever it may be. And I think that part is appealing to people because it's, again, the last vestige where any of that actually matters. And so whereas I think a lot of our politics is scientifically engineered to make us feel hopeless, the legal space is a place that reality can't fall victim to the distortion field that's applied to everything else. And people recognize that. And also people like to see Democrats win, and that is, again, the last place where we do see Democrats far more often than not win.
So what does it tell us that the latest thing you've added to your channel is comedy?
So that is, I think that's important, and that was like an offshoot from something that happened in the 2024 election, because I do think it's important for people who consume politics and don't want to seek it out. Sometimes they bump into politics, and I think comedy is a really great gateway for them to do that. The reason that I'm interested in politics is because I used to watch Seth Meyers and Jon Stewart, and that's it. That's what got me. Without Seth Meyers and Jon Stewart, without comedy, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And the irony is that most of what I do is not funny, and it's pretty fucking grim, to be honest. It's like the opposite of comedy. But I think it's important for people to have different gateways into this stuff. And the whole ethos of my channel and my brand online is that I've always wanted to make politics accessible. I don't want my channel or any of my political content to feel like punchbowl news. I want it to feel like a way that regular people who haven't, grown up watching C-SPAN or reading the news can still stay on top of this stuff. Prior to just a few years ago, I had never even been to Washington, D.C., and so I try to make sure that when I'm creating...
Which is really saying something, because you grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah. I mean,
not that far.
No, it's not that far, and so I expressly avoided it. And I think like staying true to that ethos is, how can I continue to make politics as accessible as I can for the widest array of people, because this is going to be, building up our coalition is going to mean putting as many people into it as possible. And comedy is a really big part of that. It was a big part of it for me. And so if I can figure out a way to reach a few more people by taking a different tack, and that's a way that I can, serve as a gateway into this ecosystem, serve as a gateway for some people who didn't pay attention to politics before to pay attention to politics now, then I'm going to do that.
All right. So just a couple of last political questions, and then I'll let you go. So for 2026, obviously I talk a lot about the risk of free and fair elections and all of that. Set all of that aside. Set aside the sort of procedural challenges that democracy will have. What do you think the 2026 election, if you are the Republicans, will be about? And then what do you think if you're the Democrats it's about? In other words, everyone always thinks that like elections are about one thing, but of course, candidates get a say on both sides and interest groups get a say on both sides. And one of the interesting things we saw in Virginia is that where I live is if you were watching the ads, Winsome Sears, who was the Republican candidate who lost by a lot, she thought the election was about transgender rights issues. Like that's the election she was running. Now that did not win the election. The election that Abigail Spanberger ran was much more about the economy and costs. So what do you think these elections will be about?
I think on the Republican side, they're assuming Trump doesn't subvert the Constitution and try and run for a third term. If we assume, naive though it may be, that there is some degree of normalcy return to politics and we don't have, some dynastic ambitions playing out on behalf of Trump, I think that we are going to continue to see the descent into Trumpism from all of these Republican candidates. And so I think we're going to see a lot of Trump impressions. I don't know what it's going to look like. I think it's going to be, we may see a world where it's like J.D. Vance and Tucker Carlson. I think that it's going to be a pretty dangerous tent of people who are going to feel newly emboldened to speak out. I mean, right now we see the extent to which everyone from Tucker to the Heritage Foundation are all courting these like groypers who are these like basically neo-Nazis. That hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse. And so if in only 10 months we've gotten to the point where the Nick Fuenteses of the world are gaining so much power in Republican politics, I can't imagine what 3 years from now is going to look like. But I can say with some degree of certainty that I think no matter how depraved your worldview is, and I'm not even just talking about politics, I mean your entire worldview, I think that there's going to be space for that in whatever the Republican Party of 2028 or 2029 looks like. That worries me because I think that the discourse is going to continue to degrade up to that point and devolve up to that point. And I don't know what that coalition is going to look like, but there's a big part of me that hopes that we will see a breaking point at some point where, regular people out there, not the terminally online people, but regular people out there see that and say, like, when I'm in a coalition with people who are espousing straight up neo-Nazi ideology, maybe I'm in the wrong coalition. But, then again, we've hoped for things like that before, and we've been disappointed before. So, but that's what I think we're going to be seeing on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, I do think, and granted, anything can change. What happens in November of 2025 can look a world different from January of 2026. So who knows? I mean, I remember sitting in January of 2020 and thinking, had you told me that the whole world would be on lockdown in 8 weeks, I would have never believed you. So who knows? But I do think that there is a big question of like establishment versus non-establishment, populist versus non-populist, fighter versus non-fighter. I think that we're going to see some type of Tea Party, some Democratic Tea Party on the left. And frankly, I think we need a Democratic Tea Party on the left because when you have a Republican Party that is as unpopular as it is right now, doing the things that they're doing right now, and the only thing more unpopular than that is the Democrats, just the Democrats as they are, that's a big problem. And I think it's just owed to the fact that there hasn't been that generational change. In large part, we have the same Democrats in office now that we had when I first started doing political media, over 10 years ago. A lot of them have been there since I could remember ever paying attention to any politics when Barack Obama was first elected to office. And my generation, millennials, has been largely shut out of office. And I should remind people too, millennials are the most liberal generation that we've ever had. We're more liberal than the silent generation, than boomers, than the Gen X's and Gen Z. And this is like we're holding it down for everybody, and we've been largely shut out of politics. So I think that I think that we will, and I think that we should have some type of Tea Party on the left. I don't know exactly how that's going to manifest, but I think the Democratic Party of 2026 and ultimately 2028 is going to look a lot different than the Democratic Party right now, and I think that's a long time coming.
Yeah, well, first of all, as a member of Gen X, we got stuck between the boomers and the millennials, the two largest cohorts. And so I don't think we were ever getting our chance at anything, which may just be fine politically because I think it's actually the most conservative generation, which is a whole topic for another day. All right, my last question to you. So you and I share one thing in common above all other things, and that is absolute devotion to our dogs.
Oh, yes.
So, yes, literally one of our favorite topics. A lot of people know about Bodhi, who was my Portuguese water dog who recently passed away, and now we have Blue, my new Portuguese water dog puppy. You, though, are sustained by your dog. So introduce him and tell us what the pampering looks like in your household.
So this is Aston. He is 14 and a half years old. If my mental health was the Empire State Building leaning to the side and it was being held up by one paperclip, this is the paperclip. My mental health is sustained by a 14 and a half year old Chihuahua. So
who has excellent health care as far
who
as
has excellent health care. This dog, I have probably been to the doctor maybe one or two times in the last 10 years. This dog goes every 90 days for a full blood panel, a full ultrasound. We had a scare when he was 9, and he had cancer, and they were able to take it out. Obviously, like, he survived and he's doing great. But I will never get to the point again where I don't make sure that I catch something before it happens. And so this dog has. I would say that this dog is probably in like the 99.9th percentile in the world of like preventative healthcare. So, I wish we had dog insurance, but we don't. But that's okay because whatever I got to do to keep this dog alive, I will. And I very often search for. I've searched for how old the oldest Chihuahua is, and he's about 21. So which heartens me.
Which is the oldest one, like, ever. Okay,
yeah,
Brian.
Which is the oldest one ever. But like in my
mind, just so you know, like Brian's sitting there setting like a floor. He's like, okay, well, 21. Yeah, that's a jumping off point.
But that's how I think about it. I'm like, all right, we've got at least 7 years. We've got at least 7 years left with this dog. You know better than anyone, and I'm sure it's the same. With your dog as well, and how it was with Bodhi as well. Is like when you work in these toxic cesspools, and that's what politics has kind of devolved into. Having these dogs that are just there to to just offer like unconditional love is so desperately needed, and such a clear, stark contrast from the rest of the world that we occupy, and that kind of confers a lot of like outsized importance to the dogs, and so that's why this guy is. This guy's as important as he is. So
well, he's doing his job, and so are you, Brian. And I want to thank both of you for joining me. And maybe the YouTube algorithm will notice there was a dog in the video.
That's right, and help
that's
out a little
okay
bit.
too.
Yeah, do your job, buddy.